Good evening. Today we are going to cover how we can use the digital dipstick and the 5 A's in the making of a billion-dollar transformation that I was part of. Approximately 10 years ago, I had become the global CIO of Cognizant just then. I spoke to several executives, associates, as well as the CEO himself, and it was clear that we wanted to pursue transformation in the IT department. I went to my then boss, Gordon Coburn, who was the CFO. Later on, he became president. Probably one of the most prodigious minds I've ever worked for. I'm so lucky to have worked with him. I learned a lot from him. So I went to him and said, Gordon, what would you choose, efficiency or transformation? The brilliant mind that he is, he chose transformation. And I was happy about that. And I told him, okay, if you give me another $25 million and 24 to 30 months, I can get it done. He smirked a bit and he explained to me the ridiculousness of my proposal by explaining how hundreds of millions of dollars had already been invested in IT and that another 25 million is not likely to bring transformation. So he wanted me to think differently. And he said, I will give you a deal. You have 6 months to make something happen and I will not give you any new dollars in your budget. Whatever you have is what you have. You can do whatever you want within that. I said, okay, Gordon, in that case, for the next 3 years, you should not talk to me about efficiency. He said, deal. And there I got my marching orders. So let's dig deeper into the need for transformation. Why did we need that? First of all, the user experience was pretty bad. We had too many URLs. Every application had its own URL and it was hard to keep track of them. Because of the cumbersome user interface, it took too long to get anything done with the IT systems. And the response time was uniformly bad across the globe. Believe it or not, we had a 400-page slide deck that accompanied our ERP system for us to operate some of the transactions. On top of that, there was a high turnaround time issue. It took too long for us to develop and deliver software to our internal customers. Now, this was very intriguing to me. Why was the software so hard to use? It doesn't make sense to think people in the IT department decided to design bad interfaces, right? It doesn't make sense. Now, Cognizant is a special place and I had several brilliant colleagues. Today, I want to talk about one of them, Malcolm Frank, who was the Chief Strategy Officer then. He was collaborating with Jeffrey Moore, the innovation expert. And they came up with a fantastic explanation for this phenomenon. They said, the reason our IT systems look like this is because they use a systems of record type of thinking. We converted paper forms, PDFs, Word documents and Excels into screens and that's why we have such a thing. They also went on to propose a solution. They said we should be inspired by the consumer systems which they called systems of engagement. Twitter, Facebook, Google, the iPhone, none of which really required any training or any such and they were a delight to use. So that gave us the inspiration and maybe that was something that we could tackle. And in the 5 A's parlance, you can say they spotted a challenge anomaly. So we set ourselves an set of extreme objectives. And I'm very proud of my team. The fantastic team that I had, we decided to set ourselves very ambitious goals. We said we will get 500% productivity gain. Because the other anomaly I had noticed was we typically chase 15 to 20% productivity gain. And if you add the change management costs, you usually wind up with negative productivity gain over time. Since we don't need training to use the consumer systems, our system should also not need any training or any other change management. And all the applications should be delivered off of a single URL. On top of that, we should have blazing speed, 500 milliseconds response time. This was unheard of in the enterprise IT world where 8 to 10 seconds was the general standard that people were pursuing. Now, even though I had advocated for the 500% goal, I was myself not convinced whether we could do this. So we took the Timesheet, which was probably the number one most used applications. All associates had to fill this every 15 days. Let me just walk you through how it worked. First, you had to go to a particular URL amongst the many. which housed the timesheet functionality. Since the timesheet was part of a larger suite in our ERP app, there were 25 different functions in that software, one of which was the timesheet. So you had to go through the menu tree and find that timesheet option. Then you had to go to the next page and click on the create timesheet button, which is the only field on that screen. Don't ask me how that came about. On the next screen, you will use the calendar control and select the time period for which you are filling the timesheet. And then you actually get in the fifth step to the actual timesheet screen, and here again you have to select all the projects to which you are booking time, and then actually enter the time and then hit the submit. Now I marked in parenthesis the 5 A's and how the opportunities were spotted. So we created a one-click timesheet that took the users directly to the fifth step. Since there is a company level calendar for the timesheets, we knew what the exact timesheet date was. So we picked that up automatically. And we picked the previous period's projects and copied that over to the current timesheet. It's not like every 15 days our projects change. So that we could copy that, and the only thing now you had to enter were the hours. That made this very easy to use, and we shaved off about 10 to 12 minutes per transaction. The one-click timesheet, right? So that, when we calculate the savings over a 3-year period, that came to approximately $1 million. And that innovation alone was $25 million business impact. Now this gave us the real confidence that we could do this sort of application development, tweak existing applications as well to get us what we needed. Now applying the 5 A's more broadly, the other big problem was that we were developing big apps, which is why it was taking time. So we would switch to a more of a small app strategy. The system of engagement was more broadly the asocial problem, which I pointed out in a prior episode. So Malcolm Frank's and Jeffrey Moore's idea is close to the asocial concept that I talked about. And because we had a frugal approach, we didn't have money, we built the system of engagement as a layer on top of the existing systems that we already had. So we didn't have to change the underlying systems of record. Now, we had so many different applications, and where do you start is a tough question. So we researched and found out the top 25 tasks that associates would do with the IT systems, and we decided to transform them. The ambiguity fractal and how we created the email approval system I have talked about in the most recent episode on 5 A's about 3 weeks ago. Lastly, we still needed a method for the frugal approach that we were taking, and by some chance I was following the startupslessonslearned.com blog from Eric Ries, and he had just started creating the buzz about the book that he was about to publish, The Lean Startup. So we were lucky to get Eric Ries into Cognizant, and he did a 3-hour workshop on Lean Startup method for my team, my internal customers and our partners. It was a very inspiring, brilliant workshop. So we adopted the Lean Startup method, making us probably one of the first large enterprises to adopt this method when Lean Startup was generally geared towards startups. We adopted the design thinking principles from Stanford. And in the future making, the past future digital dot that we connected was the iOS apps, small apps. So we built our own app store and we housed our small apps in that. That made it very easy for our associates to find the apps and use them. I am grateful to the leadership team in Cognizant and all our associates who adopted this system very quickly with no change management or training. And in a matter of 3 years, we had rolled out 700 applications, which reached 98% of the associate population globally. And within 3 years, the applications had been used 100 million times. Now, when we computed the business impact of just the top 25 apps, right, not all of the 700, we had saved about 45 million hours for the associates over a 3-year period, which works out approximately to $1 billion of business impact. Now, how can you do such a thing in your own system or process or functional area? You can go to the hypoha.com URL, which is our Menti resource site. You can download the digital Dipstick Excel. You can fill the rows for the top 10 transactions in the system that you want to transform. I have filled out the timesheet here. The columns are the number of screens, the number of fields, the number of users, and then it automatically computes the dipstick column. So if you just pick the rows that appear in red, you can now apply the 5 ways and envision your own digital transformations for the system that you are operating. With that, I thank you all for listening.